Tutorial 3. Fusing the pieces of the lining. In this tutorial, I'm going to fuse the lining pieces. I put the medium piece of the corset front onto the press board and unpin it. I take off the lining pieces cut out of batiste and main lining fabric. The fused pieces of the front crepe part remain on the press board. I place the batiste carefully over the crepe pieces, its adhesive layer up. I put 2 crepe satin pieces of the lining on top and even outcut edges very carefully. And finally, I put the second batiste piece on top of it with the adhesive layer down. I fasten the iron-on material by stamping it carefully with the iron. Then I remove the face pieces and finish pressing the lining pieces. No matter how accurately I wrench the fabric, it still goes beyond the iron-on material by some 1–2 millimeters because the fabric does get deformed during the pressing process and the fusing of batiste. So I still need to shape these areas. This procedure demonstrates how hard it is to fuse pieces that have been individually cut out of iron-on material. That is why I highly recommend you fusing the fabric beforehand and only afterwards going on to the cutting. However, there are situations when fusing all fabric in advance is impossible, which is why I have shown you what to do in a case like this. Then and there, I have explained and demonstrated you the principle of fusing a corset. It is a sandwich principle. I place the pieces that need fusing onto the pieces that match the pattern best. I repeat the same with the rest of the cut-out corset pieces. the side pieces of the front. I reach the central piece of the front. At first, I go through the same steps that were made for other corset pieces. But I have cut out a separate piece of hard iron-on fabric for some extra supporting effect in the cup area. And I do the following. I put a cup piece made of the hard iron-on material over the lining piece with its adhesive layer down. I press it a little. Next, I shape the fused pieces. I trim the hard iron-on material along the seam allowance line, and I press the hard iron-on material one more time through. This is what the central piece of the lining of the front looks like when the cut piece of the iron-on material is fused onto it. I restore the notches that have been covered with the hard iron-on material. And again, I take two neat-in front pieces of the lining and place the cup supporting pieces of hard iron-on material on top of them with their adhesive layer down. I press the hard iron-on material through. And I repeat the same steps for the pieces of the side part of the back. I've used the lining pieces of the central part of the back. I have finished fusing all lining pieces and fused some hard iron-on fabric onto the cups. Marking the location of bones. Now I start marking the location of bones. I start with the lining piece of the central part of the front. I make preparatory markings on the fabric. Here is the sequence of the working process. I join the notches of the bust line using a ruler, line AB. I find the middle of the AB section, point A1. I join the notches of the waistline using a ruler, line CD. I find the middle of the CD section, point C1. I draw a line connecting points A1 and C1. I draw two parallel lines NP and LM, stepping 1.4, 1.6 inches down and 1.2 inches up the AB line. I mark points E1 and E2 at a 0.8 gap from the edge of the piece. The A1-C1 line divides the neckline curve in half. I divide each half of the curve one more time, marking points F1 and F2. I make two parallel lines GH and JK at a distance of 0.8 inches from each side of the A1-C1 line. The marking is finished. Side pieces of the front. I mark the location of bones on the side pieces of the front. I draw a line on both pieces going along the middle of the waistline lengthwise to the whole piece, almost parallel to the cut edge line. I go through the same steps for the medium pieces of the front. I make some preparatory markings on the fabric. I join the notches of the bust line using a ruler, line A2. The A2 line is an extension of the AB line on the central piece of the front. Point 8 is the general point of all these pieces. I mark point E1, leaving a 0.8-inch gap from the edge of the piece. This point should lie at the same level with the E1 point on the central piece of the front. Now I find the culmination point of the hard iron-on material, point F3. I draw a line connecting points E1 and F3. Now I need to decide where will be the border or the baseline of the cup I'm going to quilt. I need to determine the intersection of the cup baseline and the bust line that is determined point R. The baseline of the round cup begins about 2.4 inches off the side of the corset. I place a corresponding side piece to this medium piece of the front. If you don't take the seam allowances of the side piece of the front into account, you're going to have about 0.8, 1.2 inches left at the bust line level of this piece. Therefore, I need to mark the remaining 0.8, 1.2 inches off the seam allowance of the medium piece of the front in order to determine the intersection of the cup baseline and the bust line, point R. Let me draw the location of the baseline of the cup. It is going to be a curve going through points R and E1. It is very easy to mark the baseline of the cup, the curve. I just place my fist onto the bust line, mark the radius with a pencil and draw a curve connecting points R and E1 by moving my hand. The curve connecting points R and E1 is an extension of the curve connecting points E1 and E2 on the central piece of the front. I mark points N and L, stepping 1.4, 1.6 inches down and 1.2 inches up the A2 line. I used exactly the same values for the AB line on the central piece of the front. I drew a line, L1, not parallel to the A2 line, but at a slight upward angle. Line LL1 is an extension of line LM on the central piece of the front. Point L is a general point of these pieces. I draw a line N and 1 not parallel to line AA2, but at a slight downward angle. Line N and 1 is an extension of line NP on the central piece of the front. Point N is the general point of these pieces. I draw a line C2, C3 dividing the bottom part of the median front piece in about a half. The marking is finished. Please note the way quilted bones will pass from the central part of the front onto the left side part of the front. I repeat the same steps for the right half of the medium piece of the corset front. I think there is no need for detailed explanation this time. All the marking is done in a mirrored way. Side pieces of the back. I mark the location of bones on the side pieces of the back. My corset is rather small-sized, which is why I'm going to put one vertical bone onto each piece about in the middle of it. If the corset were large-sized, I would have divided the width of the piece into 3 sections and put 2 vertical bones onto each section. Central pieces of the back. There is no need for additional bones on the central pieces of the back because there will be some bones for the lacing.